Well, let's begin the second century of the Legal Sports Report podcast here on episode number 101. I'm Adam Candee, joined this week by Dustin Gouker. Matt Brown, of course, will rejoin us shortly. He's just off tuning up that Twitter account that everyone who hates themselves loves to follow. You can, of course, find Dustin on Twitter at Dustin Gouker. You can find me at Adam Candee. That is 2 E's and no Y at the end. Thanks again to Scott Warfield from the PGA Tour, who joined us last week to talk about the future of golf betting as we celebrated episode number 100 of the Legal Sports Report podcast. This week, we have a big name in the U.S. sports betting industry that will be going away as another big name tries to push farther into the industry. A fight going on overseas that could affect the U.S. market continues to be a factor in the news, and a couple of acquisitions, including one inside our own house as well. So, Dustin, let's kick it off with Caesars and William Hill as we find out in the most recent Caesars earnings call that after the acquisition of William Hill, there might not be much William Hill to be had in the future.
Yeah, I guess we knew this was coming. It just wasn't formalized for quite a while, but Caesars will be retiring the William Hill brand. Looks like they're trying to do it by NFL season. William Hill, obviously a big UK brand, has been in Nevada for quite a while and was an early adopter in the US. And William Hill has been familiar to a lot of people who have online sports betting. But William Hill, the Caesars sports brand, is coming to everyone eventually. I think we knew this as Caesars acquired them, that they'd be leveraging their own brand rather than a brand that doesn't have a ton of value in the United States outside of Nevada, I would say. So that's coming. Interesting news for sure. But it really kind of Caesars has been kind of quiet about all this, and now going to be becoming more loud, I think, here with their name being out there in more states as online betting expands.
Dustin, does it feel to you a little bit like the way BetMGM went about things, but just sort of delayed, right? Like, we knew BetMGM was going to be a big player in this, but the first year of legal sports betting from 18 to 19, they were really quiet. They didn't do a whole lot. And then they began the big ad push, and now they have gained a lot of market share, in a lot of different states. Does it feel similar to you with Caesars?
It does. It feels like they've been biding their time and keeping their powder dry until they maybe had this brand, if they knew this was coming anyway at some point, and that they would. I mean, Caesars, I think, and they probably some reactionary too, right? That they saw MGM do this and like, well, guess we better be doing this as well. And this makes basically all of the the big casino companies in Vegas, right? At least the strip casinos are now pretty heavily in online gambling between them, MGM, and Wynn, of course, has been making some waves as well with their product and trying to expand that. So it does have a feeling of that Caesars, we're going to be seeing a lot more investment. I think they kind of hinted at that they've been under investing in the sports product with just William Hill, and of course Caesars has been a long time part of the online casino in New Jersey. They have casino, and casino is a growing part of this all as well. So this is just another iteration of that, and we're going to be seeing a lot more of Caesars moving forward.
So, as we look at the strip in particular, the one thing you didn't mention, but you know what? It's because we're not used to mentioning it, and we don't really know what the plans are, is Las Vegas Sands. They might eventually get into this. We've heard some saber rattling with them as to whether they'll be part of this, but you're right. Now we have MGM and Caesars and Wynn all spoken for, and the Caesars iteration in particular will be interesting because, as we've discussed on this podcast multiple times, William Hill is just not a well-known brand in the U.S. As much of a reputation as it has in the U.K. and in Europe. If you go ask people outside of the Las Vegas market, hey, do you recognize Caesars or do you recognize William Hill? You much more often hear, yeah, well, I know Caesars.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Caesars, arguably, I'd say out of all these companies, the best brand. Like, people know Caesars. Caesars was, MGM Grand and Caesars Palace are kind of, names that people just know when you think about Vegas, and even AC, right? Because Caesars has been a big part of AC for a long time as well. So there's that. It's also interesting to connect little dots like this. I'm sure a lot of people are aware of the news that Verizon sold off its Yahoo brand to Apollo, which is interesting because it's that is now the owner of Las Vegas Sands, Venetian on the Vegas Strip as well. you connect dots. Yahoo has a deal with MGM as an exclusive provider of their odds and what's going on there. Does any of this change that dynamic? Who knows? But it's interesting that that's a little obviously that acquisition of Yahoo had zero to do with sports betting, or maybe it does. I don't know. Maybe there's at least a chance you could start trying to leverage the Yahoo sports brand as a sports betting brand, as a sportsbook brand more widely. So who knows where that develops? But as you step back and just again, I look at that. Yes, it's the big casinos are into online betting in a big way right now, and Caesars is the next part of that. MGM already very dedicated to this, Wynn building its own thing as well, and Caesars has been so quiet, like we said, but is really now coming to the forefront, and we're gonna I'd say we're gonna see. I don't know if we're gonna see DraftKings, FanDuel, and MGM levels of marketing and acquisition, but we're gonna start seeing more.
Well, I think that was the interesting part in what Tom Reeg, the CEO of Caesars, was talking about in the earnings call, where the initial part of the call, it sounded like he was going to put a mountain of cash in front of the Caesars Palace fountains and just light it on fire to compete. And then he kind of backtracked a little bit with that and said, well, we'll be reasonable about the way we're going about this. We're not just going to throw money at the whole thing. But I mean, really, throwing money at it is the way here in the first 3 years of U.S. sports betting. If you're not throwing money at it, you're probably going to be falling behind. So it'll be interesting to see how Caesars chooses to do that. And a William Hill brand that we know among some corners of the so-called sharps and professional bettors was not as well received will go away, and see how the trading goes on the Caesars side. Of course, Dustin, not the only big name that we're hearing news out of over the last week. News from Flutter, Fox. We've had continuing discussions there because Fox is, of course, suing Flutter. We've talked about that over what the value of that option that Fox has to buy more is actually worth. And now, as we see the back and forth go on, Rupert Murdoch saying, well, we might pull FanDuel ads off Fox Sports, and then Flutter kind of responding in kind and saying, well, if we do an IPO in the U.S. with FanDuel, that FoxBet would be excluded from that. That's the most recent news, that last piece there. And within that, I thought was the more interesting piece of news, where Flutter basically came out and said, yeah, you know what? FanDuel is 80-90% of what we do, and FoxBet's really just a small part of the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating that they broke those numbers out. We didn't have a whole lot of, we see a little bit of the breakdown in numbers in some states, and that, I don't think there's any secret that FanDuel is the much bigger brand, but to be 8-9x of FoxBet, which that's it's a little jarring to see, especially knowing how much Fox puts how much promotion you get it on just through their channels. Like you see, like they promote the Super 6 game. You get that all the time while you're watching NFL, right? And it's interesting. That's it feels like, I don't know, it just feels like, I don't know what you think, but it feels like we're headed toward it. How do you start not having a bad breakup right at this point? People are slinging mud at each other, and it's starting to look messy, and I guess you can work it out, but it starts to feel like we're headed toward a breakup that's irrevocable at this point almost.
Well, to your point, Dustin, there's another piece of news that we just got more information on yesterday, where Fox Corp bought Outkick, the Clay Travis media outfit. And we know that FanDuel itself has kind of built its own little media empire. Again, it's all under the Flutter umbrella, at least for now. But a move like that almost gives you just a little bit of a word in the back of your head that says, well, is Fox kind of covering itself in case they end up outside of Flutter, where they do have another media arm that goes beyond what's under the standard Fox Corp. So I'm with you in that. It can be salvaged, I think, depending on where the cooler heads really come in on this whole thing. But it's not the way that it seems to be escalating as we head toward arbitration between Fox and Flutter.
Yeah, and Fox wants to get the max out of it. Maybe it feels it's not getting the max out of all of this. Maybe it'd be better spun out. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, you're right. It is like, it does seem like a firewall when we heard that Outkick news. To me, I agree with that. It feels like I can't even list all the FanDuel partners, right?
Right.
It's another one or two every week, it seems like, at this point. So we're like, yeah, you need, and Fox obviously can leverage the Fox brand to great effect. But this is another, they say the Outkick site does a lot of traffic for FanDuel and things like that. Who knows? I'm a little of a bit of a seller on how much traffic they're sending to FanDuel, but it's who knows where else is going, but it nothing as outsiders looking at this and just whispers in the background. It doesn't seem like we're headed toward kissing and making up, but there's time. Money and all sorts of things can change things behind the scenes.
If you dig back down to the beginnings of this, we asked from the very start with when the acquisition of Stars/FoxBet happened. We said, how are FanDuel and FoxBet going to coexist under the same umbrella with Flutter? And the answer we got at the time was, well, FanDuel will kind of be for the more serious player, and we'll kind of move toward the casual and rec player with Fox because of the TV partnership that you've mentioned. You can't watch an NFL game without having Terry Bradshaw's money shoved down your throat. So, you see that there has been this effort to market Fox for a while and have FanDuel at the same time. And obviously it's played out the way that it's played out, where FanDuel has certainly been by far the more profitable brands, generated the more revenue. And, it never seemed to really jive in our heads how those two brands would coexist.
Yeah, and maybe it's just a hastening of all of that. But yeah, I mean, why, especially if you're not making you're putting a lot of effort into FoxBet and it's not getting a ton of revenue, right? So why don't you just dump all of that effort and people and into the FanDuel brand? Why, again, as outsiders looking at all this, that seems to make sense. Like you have a good brand. We said in the past, maybe having a secondary brand that's, but if you're only at 9% at this point of group revenue, and you have to maybe you're cannibalizing yourself to some extent. I don't know, but it does feel like maybe you should just be putting all the eggs in one basket at this point, especially since that basket in FanDuel is a very good basket right now.
I mean, it's the U.S. market leader, and as you see MGM continue to rise and DraftKings continue to spend to hold its place, and Caesars come along, you really do look and say, well, what would you lose ultimately if you lost the FoxBet brand? It's not a brand that's caught on. And if you were advertising FanDuel on Fox, if on the NFL pregame show they were talking about FanDuel, it's not like you lose any brand awareness. In fact, you probably gain some brand awareness in the end. So it'll be fascinating. There's a lot that has to happen here and play out with that arbitration and, the price of that option to be determined and so on. So we'll be watching. Let's keep going here and talk about a couple of things closer to home. We've got the situation between Better Collective and the Action Network, where Better Collective, of course, in full disclosure, a competitor of ours, has acquired the Action Network. Catena Media, our parent company, has acquired Lineups, as well as we see some consolidation within the affiliate space.
Yeah, one of these obviously more flashier than the other, and I'd say that's not ours. That's the Better Collective acquiring of Action Network for almost $250 million for a single website. That's nuts. I don't know. I've done reporting on the Action Network. I know a lot. I know some of what's going on. They have built a very, what I think is a pretty good website. and an app and all of the functionality, the subscription part, great. They've built a cool thing. They have a lot of people working there to create that, and to generate those revenues, they create a lot of. They have a lot of people working and doing it. Who knows how that works out? It's a. I think it's a smart play. Action Network has been casting about for either raising money or to be sold for quite a while. I don't think that's a secret in anybody in any sports betting circles. But it's fascinating that something that a single website in the content space is worth $250 million apparently, and that valuation is not wild. In terms of the revenue and the multiples that we're talking as things mature here in the U.S. And then we bought a site. We bought a site too, Lineups, which is certainly not as well known of a brand in the U.S. It is a what I'd say a good site for a lot of reasons, and I think it strengthens our company. It gives us another consumer-facing sports betting site that it does very well, so it's this consolidation is. Yeah, the affiliate and media consolidation, all this, it's still, there's still more of that to come. We've seen more. We don't always talk about this, our little neck of the woods and what goes on, but there's been a lot of consolidation just in the past year in terms of that. And this is the price of business, $250 million for Action Network. We paid $40 million for lineups, and that's if you've built something good in the sports betting space, I mean, wish you would have built something yourself, right? So you could have gone and sold it at some point. I helped build Legal Sports Report. It sold several years ago to this company, and it shows that if you're doing something smart in the sports betting space, you have an exit plan of making a butt ton of money.
Well, I didn't want to let people in on this. We said that Matt would be back with us soon, but once we spend $40 million, we can only afford a celebrity like Matt every other week now. So we'll bring him back as soon as we can. But just know that got to spend money to make money, but got to cut corners somewhere. So no, in all seriousness, sorry, Matt. You're still our monkey. So Dustin, back in our sort of normal space that we talk about here, we've been waiting on the sports betting bill in Ohio for quite a while. This has been a 2-year process to put this bill together. Finally, just today, the bill drops, and we kind of looked at it and went, this is different. And I'm not sure if different is all that good.
No, what? No, these people. I mean, I know lawmakers listen to us and read our stuff. Apparently not the right ones, because this is another like facepalm, cover your eyes. I mean, maybe it's not that bad, but it's also like you've been working on this for 2 years, and you're trying to reinvent the wheel for how sports betting is going to happen. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are several models of sports betting that have been floated in legislatures that you don't maybe not quite copy and paste, but you can copy and paste them and be successful. And we have just all sorts of weird stuff here. Like I don't even know what, like I read this, I don't even know what they mean. Like, and it's there's 40 licenses available, right? I'm just going to read these passages from Matt Waters' story because it's interesting. There'll be 20 Class A licenses for mobile operations that want to, quote unquote, bank the bets. Okay. The other 20 Class B licenses are for retail sportsbooks that will focus on the new phenomenon called proposition betting, which, by the way, not a new phenomenon. This has been around for a while. So, like, I'm reading this. This is like the starting point of like, oh, this is how licenses are getting out. And I'm also a fan of competitive markets, but it looks like they're also trying to, on purpose, cut out the casinos or make them bid competitively, and I'm for competitive markets, but casinos are also partners of the states because they pay a lot of taxes, they invest in infrastructure, they do things like trying to piss them off again, like we did that. We're seeing that in New York, and now here, like, why are you doing that? These are big job providers in your states, and you're not trying to help them get into sports betting. Like, they don't even have a God-given right to do it in this bill. So I don't know. Like, I don't know why lawmakers feel the need to try to outsmart themselves, which is kind of what this smells like to me at a top level in Ohio.
So there's the part that you mentioned, of course, with the weirdness of banking bets. Not really even totally sure what that means. Class A and Class B licenses, but the fact that in the bill as is, retail casinos would not be able to build retail sports books without applying for a separate license, which is about as weird as it gets. And then professional sports teams would essentially not be guaranteed a license. They would have to apply and compete with others. And then we haven't even gotten to the best part yet, which is, okay, I understand that there were small lottery retailers who came and said, we want a part of this. Sure, that's only natural. It makes sense. But then the lawmakers decided to go and create a separate game for those lottery organizations, small stores, whatever it is, to get involved in, something where you would buy a $20 ticket and be put into a pool of people. Let's say it's a Browns-Steelers game. I guess it would be sort of like 50-50 where, you're either picking one side or the other and you split the total winnings in the pool. Like, I get that in some ways you're trying to create an easy entry point for people who are lottery bettors to bet on sports, but it's also frankly just kind of weird, and I'm not sure there was a demand for it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it sounds so weird, but at least it kind of cuts the lottery out in any kind of meaningful way. They're doing something totally different that God only knows. I guess it has a chance of doing well, but it's not like going to interfere with the real sports betting market. Although, as we discussed, like, I don't even know exactly what that even looks like, or if it's what we're exactly creating in Ohio, and how it comps to what we've seen in the U.S. in terms of is it going to be kind of open and things are kind of normal when it all shakes out, or is it just very weird? And the retail sportsbooks not being a casino is like, what's the point of that? Like, I know it feels like we created bingo cards of dumb policy decisions, and like Ohio's like, oh, this sounds great. Here, do all this dumb stuff, right? And maybe that's a little harsh, but and again, maybe the bill works out better than it looks, but like we've now seen like just kind of bad policy in New York and arguably in Florida, and Illinois was weird. It's like what like. We have successful states that have simplified this and not made this hard. Like, why are you just not doing what those states are doing? This isn't, again, not rocket science. Not we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We kind of know what works. So it's frustrating to see again another legislature come out here and try to reinvent the wheel.
I mean, one of the very first states to launch in New Jersey has one of these simpler models you will ever see, where each casino gets three brands. They tax retail and mobile sports betting wagers at different rates. 13.25% seems fairly reasonable for mobile sports wagering, and they had $6 billion wagered last year in a pandemic year. So you can look at a very simple model like that. You can look at Colorado and see a state that just said, sure, everybody gets a brand, right? Like every casino gets a brand. You have statewide mobile. They have mobile betting that has reached 98%, even with the casinos still open. But this is what happens when you overthink it, right? This is what happens not only when you overthink it, but also when you lose institutional knowledge. Keep in mind that what happened in Ohio was not only did the Speaker of the House end up under indictment, but you also had the original sponsors who had been working on this bill for a year and a half get voted out in the election. And so you had other legislators kind of trying to pick up the ball and run with it. And here we are. We ended up with this.
Again, not great, and hopefully, I mean, this is just the start. Hopefully, but it seems like there's been a lot of work, so maybe this is a done product. Hopefully, that we can change it and we can get it a little better. But again, you're right. You look at, I mean, you can even, I mean, we can argue whether Tennessee didn't do it perfect either. But like, you could just if you want to have it an open market, just make it an open market. Like they've created this in between weirdness. Like, I don't know. You could, like, if you just want to be open, just like say anybody wants to apply, come do sports betting business. Why are you limiting licenses and making them weird? Like, this doesn't have to be as hard. Like gambling regulation is important, but it doesn't have to be as hard as we're making it sometimes.
Yeah, I just don't know why certain states seem to be making the case that we've argued against for federal legislation for so long. Like, the more you fracture and screw this market up, the more that you back up people who said, well, it'd be easier if you just had one model to go in 50 states. And we were sitting here saying, no, gaming has been able to regulate itself at the state level for a long time. So stop giving ammo to those people. Just do something simple that works, because there are models out there that work, and you don't have to reinvent that wheel. Well, Dustin, another state where I don't know that they're necessarily reinventing the wheel, but they certainly had to work within some interesting constraints because of not only the Seminole tribe and the constitutional issues in Florida, but what's going on with Florida? Anything in particular new down in the Sunshine State as we try to figure out what comes next after the landmark deal between Governor DeSantis and the Seminole?
Yeah, I mean, we're 2 weeks out, a little less than that, from the special session to consider legislation to ratify the compact that the governor signed with the Seminoles that that dealt with a lot of things about gambling, but sports betting in there. I would want to be a lobbyist in Florida right now and collect all the checks for all the hours they're going to be billing, and people trying to, it seems kind of like a done deal in the Senate, but maybe in the House need to twist some arms possibly to get this through. This is when the rubber meets the road, and there's this was negotiated with the Seminoles. We, obviously think other games, at least being interested in the state, were aware of a lot of this. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have gotten this far. But there's been a lot of talk about this since it came out, and exactly how sports betting would work out if it could get cut out, and then in terms of not being legal or getting a legal challenge. Who knows? But we're like in thoughts and prayers to whoever has to watch all the special session for us. I don't know who's going to draw that assignment, or if you're like putting up drawing short straws to see who has to watch every minute of the special session. But it's there's going to be that's where the rubber meets the road. If this gets done, then we're again headed toward possibly legal sports betting again. All of these legal issues with the federal how it intersects with federal law, and what's going on in terms of whether there's going to be a legal challenge, which we've already heard at least one group promise that there will be a legal challenge to this compact, and how sports betting goes down.
Dustin, I can't decide if this would be some sort of weird U.S. hazing introduction for Brad Allen to have to sit through this and say, what are you weird Americans doing? Or if maybe Pat Evans, as the new guy, just has to, hunker down and get himself ready for days upon days of it. We'll figure out one way or the other who draws that straw, but we shall see as it comes up. I'll run through a few quick state updates before we get out of here, as I usually do at the end of this. Let's go up to Maine for a second, which was the state that had one of the weirder experiences of the last year, where Governor Janet Mills vetoed legislation that had passed to create a mobile sports betting market in Maine, then was able to successfully survive an attempted override of that. Well, we're back at it again. Same legislators who were involved last time have dropped legislation. The question this time in Maine, even though it seemed like it was settled last time, is going to be a fight over whether to have licenses tethered to casinos or whether to have a truly open mobile market. We've seen states go with both models. We've seen states be successful with both models. So we'll see what ultimately comes out of there. We're kind of early stages in that one. Down the coast, we go to Maryland, where we're still waiting on Governor Larry Hogan to sign the enabling legislation for Maryland sports betting, which was passed by voters in 2020. That got through right at the end of the session, so Hogan has 30 days to decide what to do with that, although it would be a big surprise if he did not ultimately sign that legislation. Voters also had their say in Louisiana, and we've now seen the bills introduced in Louisiana to deal with taxation and regulation of sports betting. 55 of 64 parishes in Louisiana voted for sports betting, and so they'll be geofenced individually to those. We just hope it will be a quicker process than it was for DFS, which was multiple years from the time that people voted for it in 2018 to actually getting it into place. Those are the major updates. Alabama right now, as we speak, trying to see if they can push something through before the end of their session. We don't have big hopes for that one at the moment, but Alabama certainly is trying to get something done to enable some form of legal sports betting. Dustin, anything that jumped out to you that I missed as I ran down the list there?
We could have run it on the Caesars part too, but Sportsbook via Caesars coming to Arizona via partnership with Arizona Diamondbacks. So another Major League Baseball team has a partnership with this. And again, I was listening to the Phillies game last night, and I tweeted about it, but it's still jarring to me. Like right during, I'm listening on the radio on the MLB feed, and like, here, go place your in-game bets on the game at DraftKings while you're listening to the game. Like, it's like, again, maybe you're more used to it in Nevada, but like all this stuff, and maybe not the in-game betting part, but it's wild to listen to a baseball game and hear this. And again, every time I'm a broken record, but like a baseball team actually partnering with a sports book to put out sports betting, wild times we live in. And what Pete Rose thinks of all of this must be fascinating.
Well, there are certain outlets you can go to find out. So when you factor in that you're going to have a sports book in Chase Field for Major League Baseball, and then literally a 2-block walk away, you're going to also have a sports book inside the Phoenix Suns arena from FanDuel. It will be a feeling of bombardment of having sports books in both places. And you talk about a Major League Baseball broadcast. Think about this. Last year, I remember watching the Yankees pregame show. There was like a full minute and a half, almost an infomercial for how to bet on the game. Then during the game I'm watching, and it didn't matter what camera shot I had. There was a FanDuel Sportsbook ad behind the plate. There was a Bet365 ad out in the outfield. And now, if you're watching the game, you're probably watching on a Bally Regional Sports Network where you're having it put to you throughout the game. And you also, if you're not on the Phillies feed, you can be on the Major League Baseball feed where they have their own betting pregame show now. So there really is no way away from it in today's world, where in the past you couldn't find it anywhere.
It feels like people have been cautioning about this for a while. It feels like we're going too far now to me. Again, like this wasn't on our list, but like again, I listen or watch the Phillies most every night for a little bit, and you can't listen without hearing a DraftKings. Like it was, I mean, just listening for like half an hour after I got off work yesterday, it was like Borgata Online Casino, DraftKings live read, DraftKings in-game betting commercial, like a BetMGM ad. It's like I don't know when we get into trouble with this, but it feels like there's such a saturation of this stuff. It feels like it's getting to be too much. Again, I'm just listening to it, like, and this is everywhere. And this is universal wherever there's online sports betting. I think you're getting bombarded with ads for, at least the big guys, BetMGM, DraftKings, and FanDuel. You can't escape this if you're watching or consuming sports content. And where this all goes, I hope, at some point people run out of money too, but I hope this draws back, because it feels like we're coming to the point where there's going to be a backlash on the sports betting advertisement at some point in the not too distant future.
I agree entirely. I actually just was recording an interview with someone in Arizona who was trying to get used to the idea of what's happening with Arizona, and we were discussing the UK and Europe situations where there has been, just in the past few years, significant backlash against advertising. Limits have been cut in certain forms of gambling, and there are cautionary tales to be learned not only from that, but I'll draw on your own experience and ask you, how much does this remind you of 2015 when you had the backlash against DraftKings and FanDuel in the DFS days?
Yeah, the only thing that saves it is that it's not quite national yet. You can still get it on Turner properties and a little bit of NFL and things like that, but it's not as pervasive, because it was literally you're watching a national game and you're getting DraftKings and FanDuel over and over and over, and there's that. So it's a little, but again, if you're in any of these markets that have launched online betting, you are seeing this. You're maybe you're in, even in New York, I'm sure you're getting tons of New Jersey and Pennsylvania on the channels that serve both, right? So it feels that way to me, and I don't know what the critical mass is, but it's maybe it's just incremental, and maybe at some point you just cross the line too far. I'm interested in this, and it's jarring. We cover this for a living, and it's jarring to me to hear all of these ads. And if it's jarring to me, it has to be jarring to the average sports fan who's just getting bombarded with gambling stuff. And it's not, and like I said, it's not even limited to that. heck, I was driving somewhere and I was listening to an NFL game, and it was a New Jersey feed of a Giants game, I think, and Borgata Online Casino on that. There's I don't know when it's too much, but it feels like it's there to me, and I hope that there's a little bit of pullback and a little bit of that. And you're seeing and we're seeing a little bit of coverage of this in Michigan as well, responsible gambling. It's been a couple of not quite hit pieces, I'd say, but there's online gambling, online sports, and online casino all rolled out all at once. All of a sudden, there's all these calls, and people are to responsible gambling hotline. People start writing about that and saying, I saw another story today kind of related to that. And it's not all related to just online casino. It's certainly legal. Some of it's access to the actual line. And some of it's apparently people see problem gambling and they're like, oh, I have a problem gambling on this website. I'm not a problem gambler. That's what people are calling this for. So again, that's, people are looking for reasons to bash gambling as it expands, and people will glom onto that, and if you're not careful, we're going to end up in a bad spot at some point.
This is not a both sides issue. The U.S. sports betting industry writ large needs to understand that it is the one who is guilty until proven innocent, right? When in the eyes of a lot of people, where as this expands, those who are rightfully and maybe irrationally talking about the potential for issues here, whether it's true problem gambling or whether it's people who have, whether it's moral, ethical, religious arguments against that don't necessarily meet the test of legislation. Either way, the more you do this, you're giving people reasons to come back against the industry. And so we say to everyone out there, just think about it. Just take a moment, stop, and think it through, because we'll be here talking about it, and we hope that we're continuing to talk about, an industry that is growing and expanding and thriving, as opposed to one that is facing headwinds, unlike what it has seen up until this point. Of course, you can find more of our coverage of this and every other issue in the industry at LegalSportsReport.com, at LSP Report on Twitter. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It helps more people find us. It helps get the delivery of it to you immediately. As soon as we're done recording, it drops into your phone. You're ready for that drive home in traffic, and you want to be bored to tears by the three of us, or this week, the two of us. Listen, if that's a great advertisement for the podcast, we'll make traffic seem okay. So Dustin Gouker can be found on Twitter at Dustin Gouker. I can be found at Adam Candee, 2 E's, no Y. And I'll take the opportunity to say this while he's not here. At Matt Brown M2, if you love yourself, follow him on Twitter.
Give us 6 stars if you like it without Matt on, if you can. I don't know if that's possible in the UX, but
Yeah, possibly. I think it's something that that the new Apple Podcast platform they're rolling out. I think that has 6 stars in it for specific instances like this. For Dustin, for me, and of course for Matt as well. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.